Member for Perth-Wellington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honour to rise in this House today to participate in the debate on the first budget of the 42nd Parliament. But I stand here disappointed with the budget that the Liberal government has decided to present. Not only is this budget out of balance, but it is out of touch with the people of Perth-Wellington and the people of Canada. In fact, earlier this winter, I undertook pre-budget consultations with key stakeholder groups in my riding. I reached out to economic and business organizations, charities, service clubs, and municipal officials in all 11 municipalities in my riding of Perth-Wellington. I carefully reviewed their feedback, and a number of common themes emerged right off the bat, and I forwarded those concerns to the Honourable Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, the concerns of my constituents and the communities in my riding are not reflected in this Liberal budget. In the response that I received, there's a key theme. The people of Perth-Wellington expected their government to operate within its own means. They did not want to see runaway spending, and they did not want to see spending for the sake of spending. Yet today we see massive deficits and a long-term plan without returning to balanced budgets. In fact, this year alone, $30 billion of new deficit spending is occurring, and $113 billion over the next 5 years. Rather than choosing to pay down the national debt, they are mortgaging Canadians for generations to come. Madam Speaker, it's one thing for the Liberals to deny the fact that they were left with a surplus, but it's quite another thing for them to break their own promise and spend deficits 3 times larger than they clearly promised in the election campaign. This government says time and time again that because interest rates are low, now is the time to spend. But what they fail to realize is that it is possible to invest without spending into unnecessary deficits. Wise spending means making targeted investments to bring along about long-term economic growth, such as our government did over the past decade. And in fact, since the depths of the global economic recession, under the leadership of our former Conservative government, we saw the private sector create nearly 1.3 million net new jobs, the largest per capita job creation in the G7. But now with this Liberal government, they are spending for the sake of spending rather than stimulating the economy. Simply put, Madam Speaker, we cannot invest in the needs and priorities of Canadians by saddling them with future debt from the reckless spending of this Liberal government. Madame la Présidente, je trouve inquiétant que ce budget comporte un certain nombre d'engagements qui ne sont pas accompagnés d'aucun détail. Le budget n'indique pas combien coûtera le Conseil sur les jeunes du ministre, combien coûtera le groupe d'experts sur l'emploi chez les jeunes, combien les entreprises devront verser au programme d'assurance emploi pour la mise en œuvre des changements prévus, ni combien dépensera le gouvernement pour étudier les façons d'établir des modalités de travail flexibles pour les employés des secteurs sous les réglementations fédérales. Madame la Présidente, le gouvernement devrait être disposé à présenter ces montants estimatifs. Il va sans dire que le secteur de l'énergie traverse des moments difficiles. En pareille situation, un gouvernement responsable doit avoir un plan pour appuyer ce secteur crucial et les millions de Canadiens qui en dépendent. Madame la Présidente, ce gouvernement n'a pas encore présenté un tel plan et ce budget n'offre rien pour susciter l'investissement. Nous avons tous vu les statistiques et les reportages sur les mises à pied dans le secteur pétrolier de l'Ouest canadien. Un certain nombre de députés ont d'ailleurs traité de la question en détail. Mais je dois rappeler à tous les honorables députés que le déclin du secteur de l'énergie a un effet négatif sur d'autres segments de notre économie. Des entreprises de partout au pays perdent des clients et des consommateurs du secteur de l'énergie. Ces entreprises doivent maintenant mettre des travailleurs à pied, y compris dans Perth-Wellington. Ce gouvernement a échoué à établir un budget qui fera croître l'économie de manière à créer des emplois de qualité, bien rémunérés dans le secteur privé. Si ce gouvernement libéral avait un plan sensé pour appuyer les petites entreprises, il aurait choisi d'investir dans les programmes et les initiatives qui ont fait leur preuve au cours de la dernière décennie. Il aurait dû investir dans l'Agence fédérale de développement économique pour le sud de l'Ontario, ou s'engager à maintenir le crédit pour l'embauche visant les petites entreprises. Il a plutôt choisi d'établir un budget qui annule les crédits d'impôt utiles et qui supprime des investissements fédéraux efficaces. And Madam Speaker, another way to help small businesses thrive is to cut red tape. I hear this time and time again as I speak with local businesses in my riding of Perth-Wellington. In fact, just last week, I spoke with the owner of a food processing facility in my riding in the town of St. Mary's. This local facility has enjoyed great success commercially across this country. Its products are now on the shelves of Costco and supermarkets across this great country. But he had an interesting statistic for me. He told me that in the past year, he has had more government auditors, inspectors, and government employees through his plant than he has employees. Madam Speaker, if we want to help small businesses, we need to address the burdensome regulation that they face, not add to it. And what's more, Madam Speaker, is that this Liberal government has already broken its promise to small businesses. In fact, the President of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business said, and I quote, that their promise related to lowering the income tax rate was broken today, as it was announced the rate will remain at 10.5% after 2016. This decision will cost small firms over $900 million more per year as of 2019, end quote. In my riding of Perth-Wellington, agriculture is the main economic driver. In fact, it is one of the largest industries in Canada. In Perth-Wellington, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Perth-Wellington has more dairy farmers than any other riding in the country. Wellington County has more chicken farmers than any other county in Ontario. Our pork and beef farmers are second to none. And since Perth-Wellington has some of the most fertile farmland in the country, our grain farmers are second to none. But Mr. Speaker, the farmers in my riding are disappointed with this Liberal government. Not only was agriculture completely left out of their speech from the throne, but in the entire 269-page budget document, agriculture enjoyed 2 pages. The first page was simply reaffirming Growing Forward 2, which our former Conservative government helped to implement with the support of the provinces, and the second page was simply referring to the genomics project undertaken in Ottawa. There was no support for Canadian farmers or Canadian farm families. The backbone of our rural economy was completely left out in the cold by this Liberal government. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if the Liberal government is going to completely ignore our rural communities and our farmers, they should simply say so. Another thing I want to touch on very briefly, Mr. Speaker, is the idea of rural infrastructure. It's disappointing that despite all the promises that were made during the election campaign, there is very little new money for the traditional infrastructure of rural communities like roads and bridges. In fact, Mr. Speaker, Perth-Wellington has a number of significant infrastructure needs as they relate to roads and bridges. As a former municipal councillor myself, I saw that need firsthand and saw the challenges faced when provinces such as those in the province of Ontario place when they put undue regulations and restrictions on the funding of rural infrastructure projects. We need to allow our municipalities to have more flexibility in choosing the priorities that they see fit and work with them from that measure. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to address briefly the idea of skills and the need to invest in skills in a well-trained economy. In my riding of Perth-Wellington, we have a skills shortage. We have a labor shortage. We actually need more people to fill the needs of certain skilled trades and unskilled trades in my riding of Perth-Wellington. But yet this budget doesn't address many of the rural concerns, such as transportation options for these communities or the targeted investment in skills training, such as apprenticeship loans and the Canada Job Grant. And the hiring credits that this Liberal government has cancelled will do nothing to help these small businesses continue to function. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of Perth-Wellington, I will be unable to support this budget. It simply does not support or even respect our rural communities, our manufacturers, our tradespeople, our farmers and farm families, or the hardworking families who struggle to make ends meet on a weekly basis. Mr. Speaker, I will be voting against this budget.